The preparation, I think this is one of the areas in which, there will be a lot of difference sometimes between the virtual and in-person interview, especially because now with COVID and with everyone being at home and with all of your family also being in the same space as you for some of you, that can complicate things. So some of my best advice for how to prepare yourself for the virtual interview, one is just finding a quiet space with a very basic background where you will not be interrupted. Will you be uninterrupted? Yes. Making sure that you have the peace of mind during your interview to not be interrupted by maybe your family members or by different noises outside or by things happening in your home, whatever that may be, by someone else who happens to be on a work call in another room. Making sure that you give yourself that space to have the interview in peace, and also making sure that you're respecting the person who's interviewing you so that they don't have to constantly have you go back and forth trying to turn something off or close a window or tell someone to be quiet or sit down because they're trying to, in that moment, they have a limited amount of time to interact with you, and they want to make sure they're getting that the best you in that situation. The background note is something that I think is we just tend to forget about or not think about sometimes or in the virtual space. So sometimes you can't control it, and I completely understand that. But as much as you can, if you can find just a blank wall behind you to face behind you, or if you can find something that's just not too distracting or that doesn't have too much movement going on, so that when you're in that interview, you and the interviewer are focused on one another, and that there aren't things running around behind you or happening behind you that would distract the person interviewing you. In another space, even if the wall is kind of, like I said, basic or blank, if you have posters or if you have different things up there or shirts hanging or whatever else that may indicate that you are messy or may indicate that you hold certain beliefs or that are just maybe have profanity on them or something, I would consider what you're presenting during the interview. You don't necessarily have an opportunity to speak to those things during the actual conversation, but if somebody sees a poster in the background that has some kind of profanity on it or some kind of message that they don't like, whether or not that belongs to you or not, whether or not there may be a story behind it or something else that's taken out of context by just seeing the poster or whatever it is behind you, you don't want that to be received by the interviewer. So just make sure that you're presenting something, you're presenting your best self, you're presenting what you want them to receive over that video, right? Because you only will have 20 or 30 minutes to talk to them about who you are, and you don't really have time to explain everything else that's going on behind you. The next thing, checking your internet connection, camera, microphone, extremely important. Right now, I, for example, know that my internet just goes out sometimes for no reason. So I'm actually on my phone's hotspot for this conversation because I don't want it to be interrupted. So in the same way, if there's a chance that your internet will go out or that it's slow or something may happen, do your best to mitigate those issues, right? So if you know that your microphone cuts out or that sometimes people have trouble hearing you, try to join the interview by phone instead, and then maybe still have your video on your computer, but you're talking through your phone. Or just do the entire thing through your phone, which may have a better connection. Explain at the beginning of the interview that, I'm not able to use my computer because of these issues, but I would still have to do this over my phone and ask if that's okay. There will be situations, especially if you're a computer science major, you're looking for a more technical role, or you're engineering, where you have to do a technical interview. So you'll have to do some kind of assessment during the actual interview time, which means you'll have to use the computer. When that happens, just make sure that you have everything set up on your machine to carry out the interview well. You would never want your Zoom to crash, which it does sometimes, or for your connection to drop when you're in the middle of the interview trying to complete an assignment or speak to someone. In saying that, things happen. Sometimes it happens. It's completely out of your control, and it is what it is. But at the very least, do everything you can at the beginning to make sure that it's not happening and that you're not experiencing these issues. And if they do happen, do the best you can to get back in touch with that interviewer and say, my internet went out. I'm so sorry, I can reschedule, or I completed the assignment. Here it is. Or follow up with a phone call so that you can explain what's going on. Next point, dress as if you're meeting in person. This is extremely important. There have been situations, I don't think many of them happened during our summer internship interviews when we went virtual, but there have been situations when I've interviewed people virtually or heard about virtual interviews where people are, wearing very bare tank tops. They're sometimes they're not wearing a shirt. They may be like in the bathroom. They may be wearing random things. The easiest way to think about this is if I were to go to this interview in person in their office, how would I dress? And that's how you should dress when you're online in the virtual space. It's really not more complicated than that. It's it's going to be for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe it's hot in your apartment. Bear with it. Get a fan. Figure out what you need to do. But you do need to make sure you're presenting your best self and dressing appropriately for that interview, because the person interviewing you is judging you by the same standards as if you were going to be there in person, right? So it's not going to be any different for them. It really shouldn't be any different for you. And you're not going to show up to the first day on the job not dressed appropriately. So why would you do that in the interview? The last piece is really what goes for every single type of interview, virtual or not. Researching the company, knowing your resume, and preparing a couple of questions for your interviewer. And like I said, it doesn't change whether it's in person or virtual, but you should still know these things and come prepared to the interview in a virtual space, those questions.
Make sure to check out the My Career tab on the BC Navigator app, where you can track your career progress based on the amount of credits you've earned, stay updated on upcoming events from the Magner Center, and watch our videos for insight and advice on your career field.